resume here. Hello. I resume here my series of podcasts where I seek to provide a critical assessment of the state of an evolution of the global frontier of scientific and technological innovation in various domains. This time, as a follow-up to the focus on AI that I started in previous video podcasts, I shall discuss various key issues that underline the architectonically and functionally unique and discrete occurrence of AI in the history of technological innovation. So let's get started. I will next address briefly various fundamental issues involved in AI's evolutionary path and the challenges it poses, including those of alignment, risk, and agency and control. Some of these issues are rather intricate and don't lend themselves to concise answers, so I shall expand on them in forthcoming video podcasts. I will deal here with various insolubilities, undecidabilities, and unknowns that surround the emergence of AI with its current architecture and its consequences, with an ultimate focus on human agency. These traits, which come associated to the irreducibility of complex systems, pose the need to, and also complicate the task of, making sense of a unique phenomenon, that is, a rare fusion of science, engineering, and empiricism, facilitated by the leveraging of huge resources in a quest to address wicked problems in a frenzied way, immersed in Faustian dilemmas and Babelian quandaries. I intend to bring up and unpack up front some of the most intricate puzzles brought about by AI, and in particular, address a major paradox. For all the promises that frontier foundation models offer about empowering humans, AI faces fundamental and possible unsolvable challenges, such as Gödel's incompleteness theorems, Turing's halting problem, and Rice's theorem, along with those other problems that pose unmeasurable complexity, all of which casts major doubts about the reach of algorithmization and the extent of alignment of the AI systems with the common good of society. AI is a unique across-the-board transformational innovation, no doubt about it. It can also be plausibly seen as self-transformative, which means that it can be endowed with attributes that enable it to drive its own advancement, such as meta-learning, evolutionary algorithms, recursive self-improvements, emerging autocatalytic networks, and the ability to change its own codes. For this reason, understanding what steers and is involved in the evolution of AI self-transformative traits matters an awful lot when it comes to discern our common future. AI belongs to a special high-order genre of innovation, one whose evolutionary pattern rests on and fits back the evolution of a set of key underlying technologies, including machine learning, deep neural networks, and semiconductors, all of which remain in a state of flux. This interplay can be expected to strongly influence AI's ultimate impact on future society-wide science and technology and economic and social trajectories. There are various reasons why, despite often lofty expectations, the AI industry is perceived in various quarters to be already entering a phase of decreasing returns, which has recently caused a strong, albeit fleeting, correction in AI companies' market value, a passing 15% fall in share values in what Silicon Valley calls a hype cycle, that is, a phase of disillusionment after a previous one of irrational euphoria, both followed eventually by a realistic appraisal of their market prospects. Admittedly, this perceived phase of decreasing returns in the AI industry may be seen just as a bump in an underlying upward business trajectory. And in any case, the current phase results from uncertain returns on investment, the exhaustion of access to free data to train the models, greater public perception of the risks involved, limits to scalability, and increasing compute and energy costs. On the issue of data quality, for instance, it has been found that relying on AI-generated content as training data for new models can lead to a degradation of models' performance. On risks, the MIT, Massachusetts Institute of Technology, has started an online AI risk repository, which reports over 700 potential risks advanced AI systems could pose. Moves like this may lead to greater circumspection, but as we shall see, for all their usefulness, their point is not necessarily to address the underlying problems involved. The current path of AI advancement is being driven largely by trial and error and empirical search efforts, which often lack an adequate grounding in theory. There can be little doubt that gaps in understanding block progress. Inexplicability, interpretability, and alignment with human values, that is, goals, purposes, and aspirations. The matters involved contain pervasive unknowns and expose vital blind spots in essential areas, which defy both the scientific and social validation of the whole enterprise at the present state of knowledge and beyond. The full advent of quantum computing may only partially help tackling these issues. The current pursuit may be viewed, at least partly, as a blind endeavor, one that necessitates radical scientific advances if the backlog of current and emerging unknowns is to be cleared. And yet, the sport of competition and geopolitical rivalries are undoubtedly occupying a dominant role when it comes to incentives, justification, and a sense of urgency for the current advancements. Regardless of the strong uncertainties, blind spots, and perceived threats associated with their eventual intractable nature. All of this in a context where mere tools are steadily but inconspicuously becoming autonomous agents. This suggests a giant collective action problem brewing, or in terms of the prisoner's dilemma, that the incentives are such that they may raise a positive and non-positive, or that is a negative sum game between individual and social interests. In this scenario, it is worth recalling the visionary warning issued by Norbert Wiener, the father of cybernetics, in 1960, when he gave notice of the possibility of disastrous consequences ensuing from the impossibility of exerting control of highly capable machines. Apparently, this lesson has not just not been heeded, it also appears to have been unlearned. I return to this point towards the end of this exposé. These issues differ radically from those relating to the routine flaws that appear in all nascent technologies, which typically require debugging, troubleshooting, and optimization during the early phases until desired performance standards are achieved. Although AI does naturally also partake of such routine flaws, I'm here more concerned with fundamental issues that are intrinsic to the very design and nature of AI qua innovation. In other words, given its high science and technology intensity, strong evolutionary traits, and self-transformational nature, AI is unlikely to find a normal working standard anytime soon, if ever. It befits to acknowledge that, at least for a short while, the onus lies not negligibly with the skeptics, including those who hold that the huge resources being invested in AI development are unlikely to measure up to expectations, and more to the point, that the perfectly aligned and controlled advanced AI is indeed not reachable. All the main players share the proclaimed business objective of attaining artificial general intelligence, AGI, within the coming 1 or 2 quinquennia at most. AGI entails reaching intellectual capabilities at least equivalent to those of human beings, including understanding, learning, creativity, and the ability to interact with and adapt to the environment in real time and across all domains. Interestingly enough, not much effort is being made to distinguish this objective from that of attaining artificial superintelligence, that is, ASI, which is an intellectual capacity that exceeds that of humans across the board. In fact, the borderlines between AGI and ASI remain pretty blurred. And this is absolutely key, since the big debate concerns what happens once AI systems get smarter than human intelligence, a stage which has indeed been already reached in various respects. I will expand on this specific point in my next video podcast. For the time being, let me just point out in this connection that AI's current evolutionary pattern points towards increasing homogenization rather than variety generation, which is bound to impoverish the scope of creativity. Those who trust AI as it currently stands and evolves argue that without reason, that when, not without reason, sorry, that when skeptics test chatbots' limits, they are apparently playing a losing game. With every new chatbot generation, those skeptics keep moving the goalposts further and further away. This is true. Those who maintain that, leaving aside precise scheduling details, the arrival of AGI is fast approaching, posit as follows. If we can interact with an AI agent that behaves, reasons, and talks to us as a person, why should we refuse to accept that it may be as intellectually capable as we are? After all, as Scott Anonson has cogently explained, our intelligence rests on bundles of neurons and their synapses, which in turn, according to the standard model of elementary particles, are ultimately composed of electrons and quarks, whereas AI rests on ones and zeros, tokens, and the processing of floating points computations. In both cases, there are two levels, one mechanistic, and the other a higher one where we deal with traits such as understanding and creativity. From this perspective, they ask, why should we not accept the legitimacy of AI on par with human intelligence? Let's consider this in some detail. Note without noticing first that our propensity to anthropomorphize AI agents militates in precisely that direction. In the first place, seeming to understand is not the same as actually understanding. As argued by John Searle in his Chinese room argument, AI models learning is syntactic in nature. But so it happens that humans semantic learning remains beyond their reach. In fact, Kurt Gödel and Alfred Tarski anticipated in a bit more focused way Searle's point when they demonstrated that informal systems and under certain conditions, syntactic probability, that is with a small v, probability, and semantic truth can diverge, and the truth can be undefinable. All this means that AI models can manage to mimic human intelligence, but not to replicate it, let alone clone it. Those who share physicist Roger Penrose's view of consciousness could refer here to the non-cloning theorem of quantum theory, which proves that it is impossible to create an independent and identical copy of an arbitrary unknown quantum state. Would thinking along these lines mean some sort of hair splitting or making a distinction without difference? Hardly. Essentially, the fact that AI models may functionally mimic the output of human intellectual capacities does not mean at all that such models can actually reproduce or reverse engineer the underlying mental processes involved. These include deep abstraction, mastery of tacit knowledge, complex counterfactual scenario building, sophisticated causal reasoning, and adaptive thinking to match time, circumstances, and context. More on this in a forthcoming video podcast. We can't rule out that AI systems may one day be able to mimic the output of some of these capabilities to some extent. Actually, they are beginning to do so. For example, Carl Friston's active inference model is supposed to allow to reproduce quite well the human adaptive capacity to minimize discrepancies between perceptions and reality by adopting the metaphor of the human mind as a probabilistic optimization machine. On these grounds, predictive accuracy is statistically maximized while model complexity is minimized, thus offsetting the opaque behavior and high energy consumption that afflicts standard large language models. Leaving aside the fact that this approach is still far from having been tested beyond some highly controlled special cases in terms of prediction reliability, the relevant question remains, can we really rely on such a metaphor of the human mind as a Bayesian optimization machine to actually replicate it? I doubt it. This in turn raises the inescapable question of how far the human capacity to successfully adapt to and interact with the world could do without an evolved sense of self-awareness and subjective perceptions. Indeed, in their absence, it is hard to figure out how somebody can discern what is the place it occupies in the world and where the borderlines lie. No doubt, AI models are able to operate a vast array of increasingly complex mathematical, statistical optimization, and logical transformations. However, for all their power, above certain thresholds of complexity, say in the presence of idiosyncratic meta-randomness, AI models cannot help but irremissibly bump into exponential problems of fundamental uncertainty, interpretability, explainability, unsolvability, unpredictability, and undecidability. For these kind of problems, no solution exists, so that they are impervious to algorithmic reduction, instead converging rapidly towards sheer uncomputability. This situation will remain so as long as logically omniscient AI systems don't appear on the horizon, which we can pretty confidently rule out for the time being. There also is a special class of transformations which raise specific problems for AI models. I'm referring to the metamorphic transformations. This may involve intricate patterns of randomness, like those associated with consciousness and the human brain, with its 100 billion neurons and over 100 trillion synaptic connections, which are utterly at odds with deterministic rules of behavior and continue challenging science after centuries of thankless efforts. When the level of randomness is very high and or unpredictable, even the most advanced AI models' pattern recognition capacities and evolutionary algorithms may fail to provide useful, meaningful, and reliable predictions or outputs. And there is a class of problems, the so-called NP-complete problems, which are considered intractable and are acknowledgedly beyond the reach of even the quantum computers of tomorrow. By the way, let me stress that machines don't need to be conscious to be dangerous. Having said that, my main point relating to intractables does not relate as much to the issue of consciousness as to that of safety, control, and agency, since they are not purely theoretical or a matter of idle curiosity, but because they curb the scope of algorithmization, they are at the core of the problem of ensuring AI alignment. In fact, confronting undecidables and intractables brings us straight to the issue of unpredictability, and with it, to an upper bound to the scope for algorithmizing the input-output transformations to be carried out by computer systems. Most algorithms are deterministic, exhaustive, and designed for a world of absolute or probabilistic optimality at worst, well-defined problem spaces, deterministic decision-making, and exhaustive evaluations. In the absence of these preconditions, the problem space gets poorly defined, complex, and uncertain. And if you cannot algorithmize the process, you can't control the machine. To the extent that this contingency cannot be managed by relying on heuristics, since heuristics involve a measure of discretionality, which in turn confers agency to the machine, a reduced scope of control ensues. In turn, machine agency carves into the space of human agency. To the extent that taking full advantage of AI models and applications in order to effect gains in efficiency in business and organizational processes in general by relying on such models and applications for decision-making, we are in the presence of an irrepressible inertial drive towards gradual increases in machine agency. We are already witnessing this in a wide spectrum of industries, including finance, insurance, and government. In turn, reducing the space for human agency means constraining human flourishing. To conclude, a valuable new paper by a set of renowned co-authors purports to bring a solution to, or at least a path towards, a solution to the problem of alignment by means of the introduction of software verifiers that go all the way to a safety specification which completely encodes all things humans might want in all contexts to be in turn built into all the foundation AI models and beyond. Unfortunately, even if this codification were feasible, which is not at all evident, since we don't necessarily know how to articulate and even less agree on what we want in all its complex variety, there is room for doubts on whether this approach could be capable of bringing about a truly and fully fail-safe system. There are at least two reasons for this. First of all, in practice, in the deterministic system, there is always bound to be a bug, which we may be eventually able to get rid of. Yet, in a non-deterministic, self-replicating, and discretionally self-improving system, one whose intelligence surpasses that of humans, this may become just not possible. The second reason lies in winner's control dilemma. It lies in the idea that as machine becomes more capable, it turns intrinsically harder to control them, thus undermining human safety and agency as a result. This can be illustrated in a stylized way, showing that in this sort of scenario, to the extent that machines become more and more capable, an increasing divergence ensues with respect to the human capacity to control and align them, and thus with the level of safety which is achievable. An image is worth more than 1,000 words, or so they say. One can figure a metaphoric illustration along the lines of the boiling frog syndrome, portraying the predicament of a good part of society pursuant to the full-fledged advent of AI under the ceteris paribus assumption. But I trust it's not too late to steer efforts in the direction of a trajectory that truly matches human needs by overcoming the hurdles discussed in this presentation. Thank you.